Hello, and welcome to the Write Club podcast, where we take you behind the pages and into the fascinating world of writing. I'm Beth, and this is Mary, and we're part of the team at Writing Magazine and Writers Online. Hi, Mary, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. I'm very excited about our guest this week. Amy Sparks is a best-selling children's author of picture, chapter, and middle grade books. She began writing after moving to Devon with her husband and 6 young children. Her books have appeared on CBeebies Storytime and been shortlisted for several book awards, including the Roald Dahl Funny Prize and the Book Trust Best Books Award. She runs author events for children and writing workshops for aspiring children's writers. Amy produces the Writing for Children pages for Writing Magazine and co-founded the Writing Magazine Picture Book Prize for aspiring picture book authors. Hello, Amy. Welcome to the Write Club. Where are we speaking to you from today?
Hello, thank you ever so much for inviting me on. Really nice to talk to you guys. Yeah, I'm from Devon, so that's where I am today.
That your writing space that you're in?
It is, yeah. It's very small. It's very messy. It's like the edge of a corner of my roof of my house that we converted in the attic, so you can literally only stand up in the middle, and the rest is surrounded with books and papers and rubbish.
What more could you want, really?
Yeah.
You've got that lovely skylight in the background as well. That's nice on a day like today.
It is so good. Well, one of the best things about it, actually, my favorite things is that I'm a bit of a sandwich writer, as in, like, I kind of tend to write mornings, early mornings, and evenings. And out of the window on the left, I see the sunrise, and it's absolutely glorious. And on the window on the right, I see the sunset, which is equally beautiful. So I think that's just really lovely. It couldn't be better positioned for that.
Oh, it sounds perfect. And what were you like as a child, and where did the urge to write come from?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think I've always been writing ever since I can remember. So the first thing I ever wrote was a song when I was 5 years old. I'm also a musician and I've been playing the keyboard, since I was about sort of 4 or 5 or whatever. So I think creating words and putting words and music together has just always been something I've done. I was a very energetic child, as my mum would probably put it, which we now realise is ADHD, but at the time, I was just a nightmare. So the actual fact that I would sit down and sort of read and write and do things was, frankly, nothing short of a miracle. But I've always loved, creating characters, creating worlds, and writing. And all through my primary school, I was always writing, and we were producing plays. I was very lucky with the school that I was in, who were very encouraging of my creative pursuits, and did all kinds of interesting things. So I went up to them and asked them, "Can we put on a play at school?" And they watched the rehearsal of this play that I'd written and I wrote to my friends into. And they liked it so much they said we could perform it in the assembly, and then it became a weekly thing. Like every Friday we'd put on a new play, and I'd have all these different characters. There was usually a lot of humor, usually magic, and you look back now and think, oh, it's just sort of paving the way, really. So it was very creative, a very creative background. And I just was always playing with these worlds and characters. And I had imaginary friends, but they weren't kind of like traditional imaginary friends. I realized now that they were just characters that I created because I enjoyed their voice. I enjoyed who they were and how they worked and what made them tick. So yeah, I think it was a very interesting childhood. And I was very adventurous. I'd always be scrabbling, over the beach, climbing up trees, and causing a little bit of trouble. I used to dig up my grandparents' garden because I thought there'd be a secret treasure or something underneath. And I found a key one time, which was wonderful. I've still got it. I dug up this old key, which my granddad wasn't hugely impressed with, but no one knew what it was for. It was nothing to do with that, with the house. So I still have it, and it's just a lovely thing to bring out when I go into schools and talk to the kids. And what is the story behind this key? Let's use your imaginations and make up a story, which was exactly what I did. When I was sort of like 10 years old and digging up the garden. So
Oh,
that
magical.
probably gives you a bit of flavour.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you tell us a little bit about your Roots publication and any other jobs that you had along the way?
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that I was always writing, and always creating, it never occurred to anyone that I could ever be a writer. So there was no sense of me going into that as a job, or even really, doing anything with it at all. So it was a little bit of a surprise in a way that it became a career. So really what did it for me was one time when I was in a work meeting. Yeah, this is very terrible of me. But I finished my bit of the meeting. The rest of the meeting wasn't really applicable, but I had to stay, but there really was nothing else that I could do. And I found myself writing this poem, and I realized at that moment, what, I have to write. I can't really be in this job anymore. It's I just have to write. So from that moment on, and then when we moved to Devon, I decided to start trying to do some writing. But I was writing magazine articles mostly at that point, or just sort of writing some poetry and things like that, not really quite sure what I was going to do. And it was only really when I had my children, as is often the way with children's authors, that I thought, oh, I've always loved writing for children. And when I think back about those times when I was at school and I was writing plays and I was writing poems and I was writing stories and songs, how alive it made me feel. And so I thought, actually, I think I want to write for children again, and just remember how that felt to have all these worlds, all this character, all this magic. It's such an incredible, beautiful time. And yeah, so that's when I thought, right, I think this is the direction that I want to go in. So I wrote my first picture book when my I had a 2-year-old and I had a newborn, and miraculously they had a sleep at the same time. And actually, no, this was my second picture book. I tell a lie. I'd had a go at writing one before that, so this was the second one that I'd ever written. And I was determined to try and do it. Earlier that day, my son had said the word hodge instead of hedgehog, because he's 2 years old, didn't quite get it right. And I said, Hodge the hedgehog. And it just kind of like came out as Hodge the hedgehog, hog the hedge, just as a little silly line to throw away at him to make him laugh. And then when they were asleep, I thought, I might actually write that. And so I did, and sent it off to the publisher who had actually seen the first story that I'd written, my first attempt, and had loved that. And they were trying to get that through acquisitions, actually. But then I sent in Hodge the Hedgehog, and they said, actually, we're going to take this one instead, because they loved it. So I was very lucky, and I'd found that publisher by looking at other picture books and seeing who they were published by, and thinking, oh, this one sounds a fabulous fit. There's a gorgeous publisher called Meadowside Children's Book, who sadly they no longer exist, but absolutely wonderful. And that's how I started. So I went to a publisher directly first, and then we kept working together, and I sent off a couple of other stories. I sent off a book called Gruff's Guide to Fairy Tale Land, which they took on with the potential for being a series, and that was illustrated by Benji Davies, as was Hodge the Hedgehog. So we kind of launched together at the same time, which was really good fun. And yeah, that was my sort of first experience of being published. So it happened for me quite quickly. I think sometimes you're in the right place at the right time, and it just all worked out.
Can you tell us a little bit about the StoryGodmother brand and how you came to set that one up?
Yeah, that's really nice, actually. It's again, I seem to kind of drift into things without necessarily have sort of planned for them to happen. But I'm a big believer in sort of taking opportunities and trying different things out. So this really kicked off over lockdown, when I've always loved sort of helping other people and sort of that kind of thing. And so when everyone was stuck inside quite early on in the lockdown, I thought, well, would anyone like to sort of do some writing craft stuff? I could run a Zoom meeting and we could talk about different aspects of writing for children. I'd been writing for children for about 11 years, I think, at this point. And people were quite up for it. It was quite funny. I think it caught me by surprise, sort of how excited people were. And it still really touches me that I had so much support and encouragement to run these sessions. I was quite nervous because I'd never done that before, and not great with technology. So the idea of having to do something on a Zoom meeting was, oh my goodness, so it's all going to go wrong. But it was great. And one of my previous writing students through the Writing Magazine creative writing courses, actually, who was also, I think, came second in the 2017 Writing Magazine Picture Book Prize that we were running. So a person that I kind of got to know through that, called Kate Thompson, and she sort of called me the Story Godmother. And I thought, oh, that's really nice. I loved that name. So I said to her, do you mind if I use that? And sort of do a kind of a Story Godmother thing. And she thought that was great. So that's where the name came from, which is really lovely because it was a very sort of organic kind of way of coming up with something. And it's kind of grown from there, really. And I absolutely love running different courses, exploring different areas of the craft. In particular, I think I love to go very nitty gritty. So there's a lot of things that are all kind of looking at how to write for children, how to write characters, how to do this and that. But I like to focus on very specific areas of craft, like how to create a certain emotional reaction, or one that I'm going to be having coming up, I think in about a week or two, is about how to create key moments in a story and what you want those to achieve and how they can kind of combine different areas of writing craft. So for me, it's that kind of really fine-tuning different areas and making that writing sparkle as much as it can. So that's kind of the areas that I'm interested in.
Oh, fab. And how do you go about planning the writing for children pages when you're writing for Writing Magazine?
This is one of my favorite jobs, actually. I love doing this because it's just a really good opportunity to sit and think, right, got a whole year to play with. I've got 12 articles. What are we going to do this year? What are we going to do? So I try to get quite a balance. So author interviews are always really good. It's wonderful to hear from established authors who have been doing it for a long time. It's great to hear from new authors, emerging authors as well. So I always like to try and include some of those and find out what people are doing, what they've learnt, what their journey has been. And again, I love looking at some of the fine details of writing craft. So I'll always throw some of those in. I like looking at different themes in children's writing and putting those together. And I'll have my little list and I'll swap bits around and sometimes make things into like 2-part mini series where you can really unpack, certain areas of writing for children. Sometimes it's quite a challenge to fit them all into one article. So to be able to spill over into 2 sometimes is really good. I'm working on a 2-parter at the moment. And I'm so glad that I've got that second part coming out the following month, because it's just giving you the opportunity just to really go deeper. And I think that's what is so helpful for writers sometimes, is just trying to get that depth. Excuse me, trying to get that depth.
In 2017, you initiated the Children's Book Prize in association with Writing Magazine, for emerging children's writers for picture and chapter books. And we've run that together every year since, which is amazing. And what was the idea and the motivation behind this?
Yeah, that was it's been going on for so many years now, and it's wonderful. And to see the people who've come through that, and how well people are doing, is really, really wonderful to see. So the idea behind this is that obviously writing for children and writing generally is just very competitive in the market. And it was a way of trying to help writers to get a foot on the ladder, to be able to say that they'd been sort of longlisted, shortlisted, or placed in a competition, an opportunity to give them feedback on their work, which I think is very valuable. And at the time when we set up the Picture Book Prize, there was only one other competition that was for unpublished picture books and picture book writers. Other than that, everything was all about awards for existing picture books, which is obviously not a huge amount of help when you're trying to get to that point. So that's one of the reasons why I set it up. I saw, well, there's obviously this gap here, and it was the same with the chapter book prize that we set up in 2020. That was in lockdown as well, I think, and because there was just nothing. there were a few picture book ones that were starting to come out. There were some middle grade ones, but chapter books in the middle, which are so crucial for the development for young readers to keep them loving reading. There was just very sort of little going on there at all. So I think we were actually the first chapter book prize competition that was around. I mean, there's a lot more now, which is really good. So there's a lot more opportunities, for writers. But setting it up was just an opportunity to help writers and give them that exposure, give them things to put on their letters, give them a learning experience. And like I said, we've seen some amazing results from these competitions. Some of the winners have gone on to sign with Julia Churchill at Heath. People have seen the books that they entered in the prize go on to be published. So it's really wonderful to see.
We always get loads of brilliant entries, don't we? What would you say you're looking for in a finalist, and what makes a story stand out to you?
I think it's having, various combinations of stories. It's one of those things that people will say you don't know what you're looking for until it comes, and it is true, because there are so many surprises that you will get in the submissions, which is wonderful. And I think that's what can make the judging so difficult, is because the stories are so varied. There's so many different styles, so many different voices, so many different ideas, and it is very hard. I think generally, if you're looking at a kind of a checklist of what people are looking for, having a really good concept, something that doesn't feel like it's been done to death. I mean, it can be something that's familiar, but if it is, I think having that kind of fresh angle on it, having a different viewpoint, adding something new that we haven't already seen. So I think that's really important. Having a character who is leading the story, who we are following through the story, that is engaging, is relatable, who we're interested in and who we care about. If you don't care about a character, it's very hard to want to finish the story, because the motivation for the reader just isn't there. So that is hugely valuable. With the writing itself, you want it to be sharp, concise, effective, emotional, very carefully chosen words that do a great job. With writing for children particularly, you don't have a huge amount of words to be flabby with. You want to get to the point, which is ironic, really, because I tend to waffle a lot for children. But it's so important in your writing to be as effective as you can in as fewer words as possible. So it's making sure that the wording has been chosen very well, and like I say, the emotional side is very important, because if a reader feels something, they're going to remember that, whether that's a gatekeeper reader, an editor, a competition judge, an agent, or a child reader or an adult reader reading it to a child. If you feel an emotional response, then you will remember that for a very, very long time. And when you get to the end of a competition entry, if you're feeling that emotional response, then you're like, wow, that was a good story. I felt something. I loved that. And you want to go back and read it again. And that is precisely what you want to get. So I'm a very big fan of considering the emotion and getting that into the story, being sure of what you're trying to communicate, what kind of emotion you are exploring, what you're unpacking, and how you want the reader to be able to feel. It's not just about the characters' emotions. That's obviously very important, but it's also how the readers are going to feel as well. So it's a two-pronged thing. And I think with the picture books and the chapter books, with picture books, I pay particular attention to how each spread will end. So if you are splitting your story into 12 spreads, which is a typical format for a picture book, how are we feeling at the end of spread 1? Are we keen to turn that page and get to spread 2? How are we feeling at the end of spread 2? Are we keen to turn the page? And all the way through the book, it's looking to see how we are drawn on into the story, desperate to read the next bit. What question is posed? What feeling are we left with? What problem is there? How are we being drawn further along with the story? And with the chapters, the chapter books, it's the same with the chapter endings. When you reach the end of a chapter, why would you not just put the book down? Why do you feel compelled to read on to the next chapter? So that for me is very important. It shows that a writer knows what they're doing, that they feel confident in their craft, and they have thought about how the reader's experience is. You know, they know that the reader is going to be feeling this at the end of a spread or the end of a chapter, and that's a great sign in a writer for me.
Oh, amazing. I'd be interested to know actually when you're writing, do you have to consider like how the parent is gonna what they're gonna think about it just as much as the child?
Yeah, definitely. And I think particularly with picture books, this is very important. With chapter books in middle grade, sometimes often the child is reading them themselves, although chapter books are often still read by parents, teachers, guardians. But with picture books, more often than not, they are read aloud. And the way that I think of picture books, it's a little bit like a script that you're putting into the hand of a tired actor. So anyone who's had young children will know it's hard work. It's very hard work. And, you know, people can be very tired. And when you sit down to read a story, you want to make it as easy as possible for that story to be, you know, delivered. And with picture books, you are trying to entertain this small, wriggly human being beside you. So obviously the pictures will do an awful lot of work there. You want things for the child to look at, and that's going to engage them as well. But it's making sure that the writing is written in such a way that people know how to communicate it with the intention that you have as the writer. So if you're writing a funny book, you want to make it as funny as it possibly can and as easy to do the voices of the characters. So giving them very strong voices, and things like that, so that there isn't a barrier between the story that you can hear in your head as a writer, to that being communicated by an adult to a child. So it should be a very sort of smooth process, and it should be very easy as possible, which is as difficult as possible. You know, it's a very hard thing to do.
And when you are reading to children, I know from my own children, they wanted the same stories over and over again. So if it's something that you enjoy reading yourself, it's a lot easier to do that night after night.
Definitely. Absolutely. And that is such a wonderful thing. You know, every children's writer, particularly picture book writers, like I say, you want the child to say again at the end of it. That's like the highest compliment that there can be, I think.
Could you tell us a little bit about your production company, Sword and Fiddle Productions?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so Sword and Fiddle, we set that up in 2022. So again, sort of post-COVID-y kind of time, and my husband and I thought it was time for a bit of a change. Storytelling in all its forms is something that fascinates me. So I think moving into a kind of a visual form of storytelling was probably inevitable at some point, and it just seemed like a good time for us. So we unfortunately, although it seemed a good time for us, it was not a good time for the industry. So from 2022, the industry kind of had an awful lot of problems. So it's been quite hard to get things off the ground. So although we're looking at sort of creating sort of TV series and feature films, what we've been doing over the last little while is actually creating short films and creating those and filming them ourselves. And that's been really lovely because it's been an opportunity to create a story that has an impact, that has a beginning, middle, and end, creates an emotional response, has something to say. And it's a bit like crafting a short story or a picture book when you write the short films. They're very, very similar. And we're just working on our third one. We did one documentary for a horse-drawn barge, which exists in Devon, which is honestly the best office you could wish for. Blue skies in the middle of Devon, and these beautiful, beautiful Shire horses pulling this canal barge into a wood for for miles. Wonderful. So it was a really fun experience. That's on our, if anyone wants to watch it, it's on our Sword and Fiddle website, which is swordandfiddle.co.uk. And it was honestly such a joyful, wholesome thing to produce. It was wonderful. And I think with a lot of my writing, whether it's stories, whether it's short films, there's always that kind of feel of a sort of hope and joy in my writing. I hope there is. So we worked on that, and then we worked on a very short microfilm when I wanted to set myself the challenge, because I can't just do anything just nice and easy for myself. I thought, what if I can tell a really interesting story in like 2 minutes? So I set myself the challenge of doing a microfilm. which was ended up being called Things We Do for Love, which is also on there. And now we're working on our next short film, which is nearly ready, and that's hopefully coming out in maybe a few months' time. And that's about one family's journey with love, loss, and walking boots. So it sort of explores the story of that. So it's quite, but they're all quite different in their own way. Some are comedy, some are more drama, some are kind of comedy drama. But it's a really good opportunity to, like I say, to explore storytelling in different forms. And I think that I find whenever I try something new in a different area, it makes me better as a storyteller. So I'm constantly learning all the time. Every writer, every storyteller will be learning for the rest of their lives because there's always a way to find something new to explore. And that's why I think writing and storytelling is so exciting, because you can never be bored. There's always more to try. So for me, exploring sort of drama and comedy in films is a really exciting thing to do. And yeah, sort of fingers crossed, we've had quite a lot of interest in some of the other projects that we're working on. I'm writing a feature film at the moment, which is I'm literally just doing the draft. Just before I came on, I was working on the edit for draft two. We've got a very exciting partner who's interested in that. So fingers crossed. You never know. It's always very weird in the industry, but we're also very passionate about sort of nurturing new talent as well, because it's very tough. And we, through the sword and fiddle work, we work with the David Banks Performers Fund, which I also set up, which helps support financially disadvantaged actors who are in usually the final year of drama school, but again, sort of to support them, because creatives can have a very rough time. So sword and fiddle are trying to work with that as well, and just make opportunities more accessible to everyone. And by having our own production company, we're able to do more in that way as well.
That's great. It sounds like it's really kind of covering a whole gap in the market there that's not really been touched before. So, yeah, I think that's great. And then,
Mm.
I mean, you've given us a little bit of a glimpse there, but what does a typical working day look like for you?
It's always very, very different. And again, I think that really suits me. It's never start at 9, finish at 5. I don't think it's ever been start at 9, finish at 5. So for example, today I've managed to get up at 6, which is a bit late for me at the moment. This time of year, I'm normally up at 5:30, but I slept in, and I was up at 6 and working. I think I was working on the film actually this morning. Um, then I home educate. Got 4 of my kids um, home at the moment, so I will now be sort of doing a lot of stuff with them during the day, and then I'll be writing again this evening. Some days, it depends. We have a very kind of fluid way of working, so there'll be times that I can snatch during the day when I can work on books or magazine articles, or other bits and pieces, or just generating ideas. I do a lot of my writing away from the laptop in my head, to be honest. I think it's partly necessity, because I just do not get the time to sit down at a laptop very often. But also partly, I think it works for me to be out in the world, observing it. Sort of if I'm out walking with my kids on the hills, I'm thinking. I think walking helps me create ideas, so things like that. So ideas and characters are with me all the time. So I think a lot of my writing, like I say, will happen very organically without tapping away on the keys. I can write whole scenes in my head where I'm really nailing the emotion of a scene and the lines of the dialogue, and then I'll stop and write it down on my phone or something so I don't forget it all. But yeah, so that's how it works for me, just snatching those moments when I can, and it all seems to work out okay. So I'm happy.
That's brilliant. And when you're doing that, do you ever like you've thought of the most perfect sort of scene or something in your head? Do you ever forget and then just get so frustrated and you don't know what to write down?
No, I don't actually. That's never happened. I think it's because I will go over it again and again in my head. So that if I haven't got my phone with me for any reason, or I can't send it and write it down anywhere, I will literally just keep running it through my head if I love it. And as I'm doing that, I'll often find, oh, I can tighten it up, I can change the beats, and if that character speaks there, and we have a line of action there, or if we use these words or this thing, and it'll get better as I kind of run over it and over it anyway. So by the time I do actually get to copy it from an email or from my phone or whatever onto a document, uh, it's normally in relatively good shape. But I think if I did forget it, then it probably wasn't that good, and I can do better. So
Yeah, that's a great point, actually.
What advice would you give to aspiring writers?
I think, excuse me, I think probably three things I would say. Firstly, I think it would come back to emotion. I think that is incredibly important because as I was saying, if you feel something as a reader, you don't forget it. So as a writer, you want to make people feel something, whether that is entertainment and laughter because you've written something very funny and it's made them feel very warm. If it's something very heartfelt, then you want to create that emotional response in someone. If you want them to feel scared at a moment, then you really need to make that emotion work. Whatever it is, I think focusing on emotion is a very, very important thing. Secondly, I think writing dangerously is a really good idea in the sense that when you start learning your craft, I think you can be very safe in your writing. And I can look back at my writing in the earlier days and sort of think, yeah, it feels a bit generic, it feels a little bit safe. I was still learning the basic tools of how to create a story. But I think as you go on, once you've got those sort of basics and you understand how to construct an effective story, I think writing dangerously and writing boldly is a really good idea, because that's when you push yourself out of generic, you push yourself out of, the safe writing. And it's like you don't want to be doggy paddling in the shallow end of the pool. You want to write something where you're diving in at the deep end and making a splash and doing something very effective. So I think having the confidence to try things that are different, push yourself out of your safe area, can result in some incredible writing and incredible experiences. And try something because you'll always learn. And I think the third thing that I'd probably say is about just being yourself. And this is so important. And I think when you start writing, it's very easy to want to be another writer, someone that you look up to, or a certain style that you enjoy. Um, and I think really the key to the most effective, potentially the most emotionally connecting writing is just absolutely being yourself with your voice, with the things that you want to say, drawing on your life experiences, because there is nothing like that. There is no one else like that. And to me, that is where you will get this heartfelt, genuine, authentic, incredibly communicative, and more original writing. So it would be, you're enough. You as yourself, that's enough. And don't be afraid to be yourself. And you'll come up with some fabulous writing, I'm sure.
That is really excellent advice. Thank you, Amy. What's next for you as a writer? Are you working on something new that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I usually work on several different things at the same time, as you probably gather. Um, so I really need to finish off this feature film and get that done, and that's going to be very exciting, and put that up to the next, into the next stage. I'm also working on a new trilogy for children, which hasn't been announced yet, so I can't say very much about it. But I've seen the front cover and I love it. And we're copy editing the first book at the moment. So I'm about to start writing book 2 in that series. And that's really fun. It's a very enjoyable thing to write. It's very probably can say it's like another funny fantasy kind of story, but very sort of wholesome. And it's a real pleasure to dip into that world. It's a very lovely place to be. So I'm enjoying that very much. And I've also got my first adult book coming out this year. That's coming out at the end of July. It's adult historical fiction, but again, it's quite energetic, quite quite accessible. So not your typical historical fiction. That's called The Players, Act 1, All the World's Stage. So again, that's sort of, I think, just drawing on my experience of writing plays as a child and spending a lot of time with actors one way and another, and my love of Shakespeare. And it's about a troupe of strolling players in 1715 who are very down on their luck, and they have one last chance to save the theatre company that they love. So I've really enjoyed working on that. So that's coming out now. So we're quite busy doing sort of the publicity and the final things for that. Last bits of editing, and then that's book 1 of a trilogy. So I've got book 2 to write for that as well. So I'll be writing the children's trilogy and the adult trilogy side by side, with films in between, and obviously the magazine articles and whatever else spins its chaotic way into my path that I haven't even thought of yet. I'll probably squeeze that into.
It's a good job you obviously enjoy your work so much, because there's not much rest in there for you.
Yeah, it's such, it feels such an authentic thing for me, and honestly I couldn't imagine ever not doing it. I think I've been doing it since I was a child. I will do it on my deathbed. I'll probably think, I need a pen, I need paper, I have to write this thing down. So yeah, I love it.
That's amazing. Honestly, I'm tired listening to all of everything that you have to do in a day. You need more hours in the day or an extra day in the week or something to do all of those jobs. Wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. And we always end by asking for a book recommendation. Have you got one for us?
I have actually. A book that I read to my boys, my 2 youngest, last year, I think, is by Joseph Elliott and illustrated by Nikki Gregory, called Nora and the Map of Mayhem. And we had so much fun reading that aloud. And this is a classic example of a book that is so well written that you can do your character voices, and the children don't want you to stop, they want the next one. So I would definitely recommend having a look at that. And I'm very excited because the second book is coming out in the series, which I think is called Nora and the Compass of Chaos. That's coming out in May, in a few weeks' time. So I'm very looking forward to getting my hands on book 2, because it's an absolute joy to read aloud. So I think I'd say that one.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And thanks so much for joining us today, Amy. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Yeah, thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of all of the endeavours that you've got going on at the minute.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. It's been really lovely.
Thanks for tuning into the Write Club. We hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to keep writing. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at Writers Online, your go-to for writing tips, competitions, and exclusive updates. Plus, you'll never miss an episode of the Write Club. Until next time, happy writing.